What if the most powerful CEOs on earth woke up to handcuffs? What if the land they exploited for decades fought back? This is not fiction. This is not fantasy. This is the true story of how a young African leader named Ibrahim Traoré dismantled a 50-year system of corporate greed and held those responsible accountable on global television. 7 CEOs, billions in stolen wealth, and one moment that shook the foundations of global capitalism. Welcome to the most explosive undercover justice story you've never seen. Stay tuned. The end, because what happened in Burkina Faso could change everything you thought you knew about power, justice, and the future of Africa. If you care about truth, if you believe in justice, then this story is for you. It began not with a roar but with a knock that shattered decades of silence. In the early morning haze of March 15th, as the sun crept slowly over the city of Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, something unimaginable unfolded. At exactly 6 a.m., special forces stormed into 7 different luxury hotels across the city. They moved with precision, synchronized like clockwork, and behind every hotel room door, a powerful man slept unaware that his world was about to end. Not just any men, these were the CEOs of some of the most powerful mining corporations in the world. Victor Petrov, the head of Goldmax Corporation, one of the globe's top gold extractors; Jean-Claude Dubois of Western Gold Mining, a Canadian giant with ties in every continent; Michael Thompson of Australian Pacific Resources, a name that commanded fear and respect in boardrooms worldwide, and 4 more, each with titles, empires, and unimaginable wealth, all arrested within minutes, all caught in their slippers, robes, and pajamas. None of them saw it coming, because none of them thought it could happen in Africa. But they underestimated one man, a young, sharp-eyed leader named Ibrahim Traoré. A name that now echoes like thunder across continents. But who is he really? And how did he bring down an empire built over 50 years in just one morning? This isn't a story of politics. It's a story of justice, of betrayal, of secrets buried in dirt and blood, and finally unearthed. Burkina Faso, a land rich in gold, poor in power. For decades, foreign companies extracted its wealth, leaving behind dust, sickness, and poverty. The people worked, the companies got rich, and the leaders, they looked the other way. Until Traoré, no press conference, no warning, just action. The arrest orders were signed in silence, the forces trained in shadows. The plan, flawless, no leaks, no mercy. Each hotel room was locked down before sunrise. Petrov reached for his phone to call private security. Too late. They were already on every floor. He was handcuffed, still in his pajamas. Dubois tried to flee. His private jet was fueled and waiting on the tarmac. But Traoré had anticipated it. All airspace was shut down, borders sealed. Dubois never made it past the parking lot. Michael Thompson, he was caught red-handed, inside a hotel conference room, transferring company assets out of Burkina Faso. His laptop, now state evidence. Every move Traoré made was calculated, surgical. But it wasn't revenge. It was something deeper, a reckoning. 50 years of exploitation, hundreds of billions in stolen resources, a system built to drain a nation and enrich foreign vaults. But in that moment, at 6 a.m., the system broke, not with explosions, but with quiet, strategic, undeniable force. And the world wasn't ready, neither were the CEOs, because for the first time in modern history, the hunters had become the hunted. This is the story they never wanted told. The story of how a young African leader flipped the script and started a revolution with 7 knocks on 7 hotel doors. Long before those hotel doors were breached, long before the world saw a single headline, a different war had already begun. Not with guns, but with spreadsheets, with satellite maps, with silence. Ibrahim Traoré wasn't just planning a raid, he was gathering proof. And what he found would shake the very foundation of international business. For 6 long months, a covert team assembled by Traoré worked in absolute secrecy. They operated from basements, from remote villages, from digital clouds, hidden far beyond reach. Traoré knew one thing. This wouldn't be enough without facts, and so he turned Burkina Faso into the most closely watched mining zone on Earth. Every mine was infiltrated. Informants were planted among workers. Every truckload of gold ore was documented. Drones flew overhead day and night, snapping thousands of high-resolution images. Satellites relayed heat maps, detecting shifts in output down to the hour. And what they discovered was horrifying. Companies were reporting only a fraction of what they were extracting. In some cases, 1/10 10 tons of gold leaving the ground each day, only 1 ton recorded. The rest disappearing into an abyss of corruption. And it wasn't just underreporting, it was theft, orchestrated industrial-scale theft, gold stolen not just from the ground, but from the mouths of Burkina Faso's children, from the hospitals never built, the schools never opened, the roads that remained nothing but dirt. And when Traoré saw the numbers, when he read the satellite data, he said just one thing: this is no longer business, this is war. Then came the documents. Traoré's legal team began acquiring 10 years of financial records from every foreign mining firm. Some were leaked, others hacked. Dozens of forensic accountants went to work. Their conclusion? A pattern of systematic fraud so precise it had to be intentional. Goldmax Corporation, just in 2019, had pulled $500 million in gold from a single site. Their tax payment to Burkina Faso? $5 million. Western Gold Mining used fake invoices to slash their payable rates. They'd sell $60,000 worth of gold, on paper, for just $10,000. The difference? Offshore accounts, hidden vaults. Australian Pacific Resources had their own scheme. They forged fake salary sheets. On paper, they paid workers 10 times their real wage. Why? To claim inflated expenses, to cut tax bills, and to pocket the difference. Burkina Faso was being robbed blind, on purpose. And yet no one had spoken, until now. All of it was compiled into a secret archive, thousands of pages, millions of dollars, traced, and one signature away from turning the tables. Traoré knew he had what he needed, but he wasn't finished, because what he found next wasn't just theft, it was betrayal at the highest level, from within his own country. And that betrayal would set fire to the next chapter of this story. The deeper Traoré dug, the darker it got. He had uncovered theft, he had traced the gold, but now he was unraveling the tricks, the corporate sleight of hand that turned billions into invisibility, the magic act that made gold disappear on paper. Goldmax, Western Pacific, they all had their own illusions. Different methods, same result, same damage, and the blueprint. Deception layered on deception. Goldmax was first to fall under the microscope. At their Taparco site, the books told one story, reality told another. Internal memos showed they were extracting 10 tons per day, yet the official reports, 1 ton. What happened to the rest? Shipped silently to third-party refiners, labeled as test samples, no invoices, no taxes, nothing, just stolen wealth. Then came the tax records. Goldmax claimed massive operational losses, but auditors discovered offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, packed with profits that never touched Burkina Faso's soil. Western Gold Mining took a different route. They didn't hide the gold, they cheapened it. Falsified invoices showed kilograms of high-grade gold, priced as if it was scrap metal, $60,000 value reported as $10,000, the remaining $50,000. Transferred out in digital dust, no trace, no shame. Pacific Resources was perhaps the most brazen. Their payroll fraud scheme was a masterclass in audacity. Miners were paid $50 a month, but on paper, $500. That gap let Pacific file inflated tax deductions, while pocketing the excess through phantom employees, fake names, fake identities, real theft. Traoré's team traced over 2,000 ghost workers. None of them existed. All of them cashed checks. The damage wasn't just financial. It was moral. This was a system designed to keep Burkina Faso poor while keeping foreign companies fat. The people labored. The corporations lied. and the leaders who were supposed to protect their nation. They helped write the rules. One executive email said it best. "Don't worry, we can buy our way through anything there." But they hadn't counted on Traoré. He didn't want a press release. He wanted blood on the page. Every invoice, every doctored ledger, every hidden vault, all documented, all admissible in court. And it wasn't just numbers. It was the beginning of a reckoning, because what came next was fire. When Traoré thought he'd seen it all, the worst betrayal hadn't even surfaced, because beneath the forged invoices, beneath the offshore accounts, lurked something more poisonous: corruption from within. It wasn't just foreign CEOs who sold. Out Burkina Faso, it was their partners in power, local officials, government ministers, even family members of the former president. And the evidence? It was irrefutable. Buried in a maze of internal emails, hidden contracts, and handwritten ledgers that no one ever expected to be read, but Traoré read them, and what he found would ignite the fury of a nation. One document revealed a 2015 agreement. Goldmax Corporation had paid $50 million to the then Minister of Energy. In exchange, their special exemption. Their tax rate dropped from 30% to 3%. That one deal alone cost Burkina Faso over $2 billion in lost revenue, and it didn't stop there. In 2017, Western Gold Mining took things further, $100 million paid directly to François Kaboré, the brother of then-President Roch Kaboré. The reward: 3 fresh mining licenses, all carved out of fertile village farmland, over 50,000 people displaced, families torn from ancestral lands, graves abandoned, homes destroyed, all for gold. And the compensation offered: $100 per family, $100 for generations of memory, for land soaked in history, for pain. Traoré had the bank transfers, the handwritten notes, the government seals. He had it all. And still, he didn't rush to the podium. He went to the courts. But not just any court. He took it to the world stage, the International Criminal Court. The charge: crimes against humanity, forced displacement, environmental destruction, child labor. And the ICC responded. They opened an investigation. They accepted the charges. They gave Traoré legal cover for what came next. Total lockdown. He froze all foreign mining accounts operating in Burkina Faso, seized their corporate assets, and took control of every ounce of gold still inside the country. $100 billion reserve, now state-owned, now untouchable, now promised to the people. The reaction from the West? Fury. European newspapers called him a dictator. The EU held emergency meetings. The US issued threats. But Traoré didn't blink. He faced the cameras and said, "For 50 years, they broke our laws. They evaded our taxes. They poisoned our land. Now, they answer to us." Western ambassadors warned of sanctions. He replied, "You think we fear hunger? We've lived with it. But we won't live with humiliation." Then something happened no one expected. The people rose, not in anger, but in hope. Tens of thousands filled the streets of Ouagadougou, holding signs that read, "Our gold is ours," chanting songs that hadn't been sung since colonial days. Old miners wept in public. Families returned to land that had once been fenced off. Traoré had given them back more than gold. He had given them dignity. And in doing so, he'd set the world on fire. Because in boardrooms across Europe and North America, a new fear took root. If Traoré could do it, who else might follow? While the streets of Ouagadougou echoed with chants, another battlefield had opened, not in dust and heat, but in halls lined with law books and world flags. The International Criminal Court had taken the case, and Traoré wasn't slowing down. He formed a special legal task force, one made up of African judges, human rights lawyers, and forensic investigators. Their goal? To hold billion-dollar empires accountable, not with rage but with evidence. Burkina Faso was no longer pleading, it was prosecuting, and the courtroom became its stage. Each CEO faced a barrage of charges, each file a weapon of truth. Victor Petrov, 234, counts. Tax evasion. Bribery, environmental destruction. Jean-Claude Dubois, 189 charges. The most damning? Employing child labor. Michael Thompson. Life-threatening pollution. Poisoning rivers with cyanide. Thousands of victims. Thousands of lives shattered, and every word spoken in court, backed by documents, backed by testimony. Traoré himself came. To the hearings, not as a president, but as a witness. He sat silently, eyes fixed on the men who once ruled from the shadows, and when he spoke, the room held its breath. "This isn't just about Burkina Faso," he said. "This is about every nation that's ever been looted. Every child robbed of a future. Every forest turned to poison. We speak for them now." The world watched, and for once Africa wasn't begging. It was leading. Outside the courtroom, Traoré moved fast. He signed an executive order creating the Burkina Faso National Mining Company. All gold mines, nationalized, all profits redirected. 70% would now go to schools, hospitals, clean water and infrastructure. No more private jets, no more offshore accounts, just roads, books, doctors. For the first time in history, Burkina Faso's gold would serve its people, and almost immediately the results began to show. Budgets that were once dry now overflowed. Construction crews arrived in rural towns. Villages that hadn't seen a doctor in decades now had clinics. Traoré gave press access to the mining fields to show the world. To prove this wasn't a publicity stunt, this was a plan, and the corporations? They panicked. Stocks plummeted. Goldmax shares dropped by 70%. Western gold mining was nearing bankruptcy. Pacific Resources suspended all African operations. From London to Sydney, crisis meetings were held. Board members shouted, investors fled. The empire was crumbling, and one young African leader had caused it, not with violence but with law. Back in court, the CEOs made their final plays. Petrov started a hunger strike. Dubois offered $1 billion in bail. Thompson faked a heart attack, but none of it worked. Traoré rejected the bribe, laughed at the theatrics, and told the world, "Our miners work hungry." Every day. Maybe now you'll understand what that feels like. The West called it dangerous, populist, even radical, but the people called it justice. And across Africa, something new began to stir. Hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, the tide had finally turned. If the arrests shocked the world, what happened inside the courtroom stunned it. This wasn't just a trial, it was a reckoning. 7 CEOs stood trial, each in suits that now looked like disguises. The prosecution didn't just argue, they unleashed a storm. File after file, email after email, testimony after harrowing testimony. Victor Petrov faced the wrath first. Goldmax's files showed massive underreporting, bribes in suitcases, even instructions to destroy evidence. But the worst? Forced displacement. Entire villages bulldozed without warning. The courtroom went silent as an elder took the stand. He showed photos of graves lost. "They dug up our ancestors for their gold," he said. Next came Jean-Claude Dubois, Western gold mining's leader. His crime? Child labor. Testimonies came from survivors, miners who were just 12 when they started. "We worked 16 hours a day. Underground," one said. "Most of my friends are dead." The room wept. Then came Thompson, Pacific Resources. The charge? Poisoned cyanide dumped into rivers. Villages lost access to drinking water. Cancer cases soared. Funeral photos filled the screens. "We begged them to stop," said a nurse from a nearby town. They laughed. But it wasn't just the crimes, it was the emails, the way they spoke of Burkina Faso. Stupid natives. They'll sell anything for $1. Use 10 kids instead of 1 adult, they never complain. Words written by men who sat in those chairs, now exposed to the world. The defense had no answers, only silence, only shame. Traoré returned to court every day. He didn't need to speak anymore. His presence said enough. He represented every voice that had been silenced, every child buried before their time, every village erased, and when the prosecutors finished, they closed with a single line. "This isn't revenge, this is justice." The judges retired, the world held its breath, and history waited for the verdict. The courtroom lights flickered as the judges returned. No one spoke, no one blinked. It felt like the air itself was holding its breath. 7 CEOs, once untouchable, now stood waiting to hear their fate. Then came the voice of the presiding judge, calm, measured, unforgiving. Victor Petrov, found guilty on all counts, sentenced to 50 years in prison, ordered to pay $10 billion in restitution. Gasps filled the chamber, but the judge continued. Jean-Claude Dubois, found guilty of employing child labor, tax fraud, and environmental abuse, sentenced to 45 years and $8 billion in fines. Michael Thompson, found guilty of environmental terrorism, life imprisonment without parole. One by one, the sentences rolled on. Robert McKenzie, 40 years for forced displacement. James Harrison, 55 years for exploiting children in deadly mines. Peter Williams, 60 years for mass poisoning and environmental devastation. David Anderson, life imprisonment for financing armed groups. But the final blow wasn't the years, it was the seizure. All personal assets confiscated, every yacht, every private jet, every art collection, every mansion, gone. The court ordered the liquidation of their properties, and the proceeds to be given directly to the victims' families. It wasn't just a verdict, it was a message that power without accountability would no longer be protected. And across the globe, reactions exploded. Western news anchors called it unprecedented. Corporate lawyers called it dangerous, but the people of Burkina Faso, they called it something else. Victory. Outside the courthouse, thousands erupted in cheers. Some wept, others danced. Old miners held their heads high, their calloused hands raised to the sky. One man cried out, "We've waited a lifetime for this." And while many in the West questioned Traoré's methods, none could deny the results. Burkina Faso had reclaimed its wealth, its dignity, its future. Traoré stepped onto a small podium that evening. No suit, no script, just conviction. He looked out over the crowd and said, "Today we did not just sentence 7 men. We sentenced a 500-year system of theft, deception, and exploitation, and we won." That night, bonfires lit up the villages, songs were sung in the native tongue. Children danced barefoot, not in celebration of gold, but of justice. And far from the deserts of Burkina Faso, boardrooms in London, New York, and Sydney sat in stunned silence. Because the world had changed, and Traoré had become a symbol of what happens when the powerless rise, when law serves the people, and when justice no longer has a price tag. This wasn't just a trial, it was a message sent around the world. It was a reckoning carved into history, and it leaves us all with a question. What if more nations followed Traoré's lead? What if justice stopped being selective? What if children no longer had to dig for the wealth they'd never see? This is not just Burkina Faso's story. This is the story of every community exploited, every voice silenced, every hope buried beneath profit. But now the world has heard. And if this story moved you, share it, talk about it, remember it, because change doesn't come from silence. It comes from courage. Traoré had the courage to act. The question is, do we?